The grand palace of Zervan Prime stood tall, its crystal towers glowing under the twin moons. It was a place of power, where only the strongest, most gifted Zervani ruled. But inside its golden halls, a lonely figure sat by a window, looking at the stars. Princess Elara was the last heir of the Zervani Empire, but no one wanted her. She was born different, weak in body and mind. Unlike others of her race, she could not fully use telepathy, the most important ability of the Zervani people. While others spoke through thoughts and connected their minds effortlessly, Elara's telepathic voice was faint, broken. For this, she was seen as unworthy. Her people believed that strength came from perfect mental bonds. Zervani mates connected their souls, becoming one in thought and purpose. Elara, unable to form such a strong link, was considered useless. The elders whispered that she would never rule. The nobles ignored her, and when the time came for her to choose a mate, no one stepped forward. The humiliation had been public. In the grand court, filled with powerful warriors and leaders, Elara had waited as names were called. One by one, the suitors refused. Some lowered their heads in respect. Others simply turned away. "She is broken," they murmured. "A weak ruler cannot lead us." Her father, the great Emperor Caliph, had remained silent. He did not defend her. He did not comfort her. She was alone. Now, days later, Elara sat in her chamber, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. She had always known she was different, but she had still hoped. She had dreamed that someone, anyone, would look past her weakness and see her. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "My lady," said her attendant, a young Zervani girl with silver skin. "The human diplomat has arrived." Elara frowned. The human. Humanity was new to the galactic stage, an upstart species that had surprised many with their rapid learning and unpredictable ways. Unlike the Zervani, humans had no telepathy, no shared minds. They relied on words, emotions, and instincts. To the Zervani, they were seen as primitive, but strangely resilient. Elara had never met a human before. She wasn't sure what to expect. Still, she stood, straightened her dress, and left her chamber. As she entered the diplomatic hall, she saw him. He was tall, with sharp eyes and a confident stance. He was not like the others who had judged her. He did not look at her with pity or disgust. Instead, there was something else in his gaze, something unreadable. Princess Elara prepared herself for another rejection. Then, to her shock, the human stepped forward and spoke. His voice was steady, filled with something she had not heard in a long time. "Will you bond with me?" The room fell into stunned silence. Silence filled the grand hall. Zervani nobles, warriors, and diplomats stared in shock at the human who had just spoken. No one had expected this. No one had ever expected this. Princess Elara, standing frozen in place, could only stare at him. Had she misheard? Had this human, a being with no telepathy, no psychic connection, really just asked to bond with her? The human did not flinch under the weight of 100 disbelieving stares. He stood tall, his brown eyes steady. His name, she remembered now, was Daniel Hayes, a diplomat from the Terran Alliance. He was here for trade negotiations, not for this, not for her. A deep voice broke the silence. "This is a joke," growled Lord Varric, a high-ranking Zervani noble. His golden eyes glowed with anger. A human dares to ask for a bond with the imperial bloodline. Absurd. Murmurs of agreement spread through the hall. Some nobles looked disgusted. Others sneered. The Zervani saw humans as a lesser species, fragile, disconnected from the great mind, and unworthy of real power. The idea of a human bonding with a Zervani royal was unthinkable. Elara finally found her voice. You cannot be serious." Daniel smiled slightly. "I am." Her heart pounded. "But why? Why would you ask this?" "Because I see something in you that they refuse to see," he said simply. "They call you weak. I don't believe that. I believe they are afraid of something they don't understand, and I believe you deserve the chance to prove them wrong." His words hit her harder than she expected. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. No one had ever defended her. Before she could reply, another voice interrupted. "The bond is impossible," said Elder Corin, an ancient Zervani who advised the Empire. His face was calm, but his tone was final. "A bond between a Zervani and a human cannot work. Humans have no telepathic ability, no shared mind, no connection to our kind." Daniel did not look away. "Then let us try." A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. "You challenge our traditions," Lord Varric hissed. "I challenge nothing," Daniel said, his voice level. "I only offer a choice. If the princess refuses, then I will leave, and we will never speak of this again. But if she accepts, then she should be given the chance to prove that a bond is more than just a telepathic link." All eyes turned to Alara. Her hands trembled. She had spent her life being rejected, being told she was not enough. But now, for the first time, someone was offering her something different. A choice. Did she dare take it? She looked into Daniel's steady eyes. And then, with a deep breath, she whispered, "I accept." The hall erupted into chaos. The grand hall was in chaos. Nobles shouted, elders whispered, and warriors stood frozen, their expressions filled with shock. A Zervani princess bonding with a human. It was unthinkable, unnatural. Some called it foolish. Others called it dangerous. Princess Alara felt their eyes on her, their judgment like a heavy weight pressing down. But she kept her gaze on Daniel Hayes, the human who had dared to stand before them all and choose her. He did not waver. He did not look away. She had accepted his offer. And now, there was no turning back. A deep voice rumbled through the hall. "This is madness." Lord Varric stepped forward, his golden eyes burning with anger. "Alara, do you understand what you have done? The bond is sacred. It is the foundation of our empire. If a ruler cannot form a proper bond, they are unfit to lead." Alara clenched her fists. "I know. Then why accept this?" He gestured toward Daniel, as if the human were nothing more than an insect. "He is not one of us. He has no telepathic link, no connection to the great mind. He cannot form a bond." Daniel finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. "Maybe your idea of a bond is too small." Varric's jaw clenched. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Some looked uncertain, others angry. Elder Corin, the wisest of the Zervani, raised a hand for silence. "Princess Alara," he said, his voice slow and thoughtful, "if you truly wish to proceed, then you must prove that your bond is real." Alara nodded. "How?" "The bonding ritual," Corin said. "It is the only way." A ripple of tension spread through the hall. The bonding ritual was an ancient test. Two souls would reach into each other's minds, linking their thoughts, their emotions, their very essence. If they succeeded, their connection would be undeniable. But if they failed, Alara did not want to think about that. She glanced at Daniel. He had no telepathy. Could this even work? As if sensing her hesitation, Daniel gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Let's try," he said. Alara swallowed hard. Then she nodded. The elders guided them to the sacred platform, a circular space in the center of the hall, surrounded by glowing symbols. The room grew silent. This was history being made. Alara placed her hands on Daniel's. His skin was warm, steady. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind, searching for something, anything that could connect them. For a moment, there was only emptiness, cold silence, a barrier between them. Then something changed. A spark of warmth, a flicker of emotion. It was not a telepathic link, not in the way the Zervani knew, but it was real. She felt his presence, strong, unshaken. And in return, he felt her. The crowd gasped. The impossible had begun. A hush fell over the grand hall. Princess Aelara's hands rested in Daniel's, her fingers trembling slightly. The Zervani nobles and elders watched in silence, their glowing eyes filled with doubt. They all expected failure. A human had no telepathic power. Without a psychic link, a bond was impossible, or so they believed. But Aelara could feel something. It was not the deep mental connection that the Zervani shared. She could not hear his thoughts, nor could she let him into her mind. Yet there was a warmth, a strange, steady presence that felt unlike anything she had ever known. Daniel was there, not just physically, but in a way that was deeper, more real. It was not a link of minds, but of something else. Will, emotion, trust. Aelara tightened her grip. I feel you. The murmurs in the hall grew louder. That is not possible, one elder whispered. She's imagining it, another said. But Elder Corrin stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Describe what you feel, princess. Aelara took a deep breath, closing her eyes. It is not like a Zervani bond. I cannot hear his thoughts, and he cannot hear mine. But I sense him. His presence is strong, solid. It is not telepathy, but it is something. Daniel gave a small smile. It's called trust. The room fell into stunned silence. Lord Varric, furious, stepped closer. Trust is not a bond. This is foolishness. You are playing a dangerous game, human. He turned to Aelara. Break this farce now, or risk your place in the Empire. Aelara lifted her chin. I will not break it. A sharp intake of breath echoed through the hall. The nobles exchanged uneasy glances. The idea that a different kind of bond could exist was unsettling. If this worked, if a human could form any kind of connection with a Zervani, it would change everything. You still have not proven anything, Varric growled. There is no bond. Daniel glanced at Aelara, and then did something that stunned everyone. He lifted her hand, gently, carefully, and pressed it to his chest. Aelara's breath caught. She could feel the steady rhythm beneath his shirt. His heartbeat. Strong. Steady. Alive. This is my bond, Daniel said softly. It's not made of thoughts or telepathy. It's made of choice. His brown eyes locked onto hers. I choose you. The words sent a shiver through her. Zervani bonds had always been based on instinct, on the automatic merging of minds. But Daniel was offering something different, something greater. A bond built not on nature, but on will. Aelara's heart pounded as she turned back to the elders. This is real, and I will prove it. The challenge had been set. Now, they had to show the Empire that a new kind of bond was possible. The weight of the Empire's judgment pressed down on Aelara. The nobles, the elders, the warriors, all of them watched, waiting for her to fail. Even her father, Emperor Calith, had remained silent, observing from his throne. His expression was unreadable, but Aelara knew the truth. He did not believe in her. He never had. But Daniel did. The human stood beside her, his presence calm and steady. He had no telepathy, no mental link, yet he had chosen her when no one else had. And now, they had to prove their bond was real. Elder Corrin stepped forward. The trial of proof must be completed. If you succeed, your bond will be accepted. His silver eyes flickered toward Daniel. If you fail, this farce ends, and the princess will be forbidden from choosing another mate. Aelara's stomach twisted. Forbidden. That meant, if they lost, she would be alone. Forever. She met Daniel's gaze. Are you ready for this? His lips curled into a small smile. Always. Elder Corrin raised a hand. The floor beneath them glowed, ancient symbols forming a circle of energy. The trial will test the strength of your connection. If you are truly bonded, you will endure together. If not, the ritual will break you. Aelara swallowed hard. She had seen Zervani mates take the trial before. It was a test of the mind. Two souls merging into one, sharing pain, fear, and truth. But Daniel had no psychic link. Would the trial even work for him? She had no time to doubt. The energy surged around them, rising like a storm. Alara gasped as a powerful force pulled at her mind, dragging her into the trial. Her vision blurred, the real world fading. Then, darkness. Alara found herself standing in a void alone. The air was heavy, thick with fear. Whispers surrounded her, soft and cruel. Weak, unworthy, broken. She knew these voices. They were the echoes of every rejection, every moment of shame. The doubts she had carried her whole life. Her chest tightened. No, I will not break. Then she heard it, a voice, strong and clear. Alara. She turned. A light cut through the darkness. Daniel stood there, reaching for her, but something was pulling him back, a force trying to separate them. She ran to him. The shadows clawed at her, voices screaming, "You are nothing. Let go." But Daniel held out his hand. "Trust me." Alara grasped his fingers, warmth flooding through her. The darkness shattered. Light exploded around them. And suddenly, she could feel him, not through telepathy, but through something deeper. Their emotions intertwined. Fear, strength, defiance. It was not a Zerveni bond, but it was real. The trial ended. Alara gasped, falling to her knees. Daniel steadied her, his grip firm. The noble stared, silent. Elder Corin finally spoke. "The bond has formed." Silence filled the grand hall. The glowing energy of the trial faded, leaving only Alara and Daniel standing at the center. She was breathing hard, her heart racing. The trial had tested them, tried to break them apart, but they had endured, together. The Zerveni nobles looked stunned. The elders whispered among themselves. This was not how the trial was supposed to work. Alara and Daniel had not linked minds in the traditional way, yet the trial had accepted them. Elder Corin stepped forward, his silver eyes filled with something Alara had never seen before, curiosity. "Explain what happened," he said. Alara swallowed, glancing at Daniel. He gave her a small nod. She took a deep breath and spoke. "I could feel him," she said, "not through telepathy, but through something else. His emotions, his will. The trial tried to separate us, but we held on. Our bond is not like the Zerveni bond, but it is real." Daniel smirked. "Seems like the trial agrees." A murmur spread through the hall. Some nobles looked outraged, others uncertain. Lord Varric's face twisted with anger. "This proves nothing," he snapped. "This is not a true bond. It is an illusion." Elder Corin raised a hand for silence. He studied Alara and Daniel carefully, then turned toward the Emperor. "Your Majesty, the trial has spoken. Whether we understand it or not, their bond exists." All eyes turned to Emperor Calith. Alara's father had been silent through it all, his expression unreadable. Now he rose from his throne, his long robes flowing behind him. He slowly descended the steps, stopping just a few feet away from Alara and Daniel. His golden eyes locked onto his daughters. "You truly believe this bond is real?" he asked. Alara lifted her chin. "Yes." The Emperor shifted his gaze to Daniel. "And you, human, do you understand what you have done? A bond with a Zervani princess is not a simple commitment. It is a lifelong vow." Daniel met his gaze without hesitation. "I know," and I meant every word. The hall remained silent. Then, after a long pause, the Emperor spoke. "The bond will be tested." His voice was firm, carrying the weight of a ruler's authority. "If it is strong, it will survive. If it is weak, it will shatter under pressure." Alara felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" Emperor Calith looked at her, then at Daniel. "The Zerveni Empire does not accept weakness. If you wish to prove your bond, you will face a trial greater than this one." Lord Varric smirked. "Yes, a true test." Alara's stomach twisted. She had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Daniel squeezed her hand. "Whatever comes next," he said softly, "we face it together." And for the first time in her life, Elara truly believed those words. Elara's heart pounded. The trial had proven their bond was real, but it was not enough. The Emperor wanted more. The grand hall was silent as Emperor Caliph looked down at his daughter and the human who had dared to stand beside her. His golden eyes were unreadable. Then his voice echoed through the chamber. "You have shown courage, but courage is not enough. A ruler must be strong. A bond must endure more than a single trial." His gaze shifted to Daniel. "You claim to stand by her, but words are easy. Now you will face the true test." Daniel's expression remained calm. "What test?" Lord Varric stepped forward, a smirk on his face. "A warrior's test." Elara's stomach twisted. No, she knew what this meant. "The trial of strength," Varric continued. "It is tradition. If you wish to claim a bond with royalty, you must prove yourself in combat." His smirk widened. "If you survive." A murmur spread through the hall. Elara's hands clenched into fists. The trial was unfair. Daniel was a diplomat, not a warrior. He did not have the speed or strength of a Zervani fighter. He was human, fragile compared to them. "This is ridiculous," she said, stepping forward. "The bond is already proven. This test is not necessary." The Emperor raised a hand, silencing her. "It is law." His gaze remained fixed on Daniel. "Do you accept?" Elara turned to him, shaking her head. "You don't have to do this." Daniel exhaled slowly. Then, to her shock, he smiled. "I accept." The room erupted into chaos. Elara grabbed his arm. "Are you insane?" she whispered. "They will kill you." Daniel chuckled. "Not if I win." She stared at him. "You can't win." Zervani warriors trained from childhood. They are faster, stronger. "Maybe," Daniel admitted, "but I don't need to be stronger. I just need to be smarter." Her heart ached. He was doing this for her. No human had ever challenged a Zervani warrior in combat and won. The odds were against him. "Very well," the Emperor said, raising his hand. "The trial will be held at first light." Elara knew there was no stopping this now. As the nobles began to leave, she turned to Daniel, her voice low with frustration. "Why did you accept?" His brown eyes met hers, filled with quiet determination. "Because they think I'm weak. They think our bond is weak. I'm going to prove them wrong." Elara sighed, shaking her head. "You are impossible." Daniel grinned. "And yet here we are." Despite the fear curling in her chest, Elara couldn't help but smile just a little. Tomorrow, the battle would begin. And she could only hope that Daniel was right. The training grounds were filled with spectators. Nobles, warriors, and even common Zervani had gathered to witness the impossible, a human facing a Zervani warrior in the trial of strength. Elara stood at the edge of the arena, her hands clenched into fists. She had barely slept. The fear of losing Daniel, of watching him get hurt, had haunted her all night. But there he was, standing in the center of the battlefield, calm and steady. Across from him stood his opponent, Commander Drek. Drek was one of the strongest warriors in the Empire. His violet skin gleamed under the morning sun, and his golden eyes burned with confidence. He was taller than Daniel, stronger, faster. Daniel didn't seem afraid. Elder Corin stepped forward, raising his hand. "This is a battle of honor. The fight continues until one combatant yields, or is unable to fight." Elara's heart pounded. "Please don't die, Daniel." Corin dropped his hand. "Begin." Drek lunged. He moved like lightning, his fist aiming for Daniel's ribs. But Daniel wasn't there. He had sidestepped at the last second, letting Drek's attack hit empty air. The crowd gasped. Drek turned, growling. He swung again, but Daniel ducked, slipping just out of reach. Alara's eyes widened. He's not fighting with strength. He's fighting with strategy. Daniel wasn't trying to overpower Drek. He was using speed, agility, his mind. He dodged every strike, letting Drek waste energy with wild attacks. Minutes passed, and Drek began to slow. His breathing became heavier. Frustration flickered in his golden eyes. Daniel smirked. Getting tired. Drek roared, charging at full speed. But Daniel moved again, sidestepping and twisting behind him. Then, for the first time, Daniel attacked. He struck Drek behind the knee. The warrior stumbled. Alara gasped. It's working. Drek spun around, furious, but his movements were sluggish. He swung again, too slow. Daniel ducked, driving his elbow into Drek's ribs. The warrior gasped, stepping back. The crowd fell silent. For the first time, the Zervani saw it. Daniel was winning. Drek's rage boiled over. With a roar, he threw a final, desperate punch. But Daniel was already moving. He dodged to the side, grabbed Drek's wrist, and twisted. The massive warrior crashed to the ground. The silence in the arena was deafening. Drek groaned, trying to rise, but his limbs were shaking. He couldn't fight anymore. He had lost. Daniel took a step back, breathing hard. Then he turned to Elder Corin. I think that means I win. A moment passed. Then, the human is victorious, Corin announced. The crowd erupted into shocked murmurs. Alara's heart nearly burst with relief. She ran to Daniel, grabbing his hands. You did it. He grinned. Told you I had a plan. From his throne, Emperor Kelith watched in silence. The impossible had happened, and the Empire would never be the same. The arena was still buzzing with shock. A human had defeated a Zervani warrior. No one had expected it. No one had even thought it was possible. Daniel stood tall, breathing hard but unbroken. Across from him, Commander Drek remained on his knees, staring at the ground, his pride shattered. Alara couldn't stop smiling. She wanted to throw her arms around Daniel, but she knew the moment wasn't over yet. The true challenge still remained, her father. Emperor Kelith rose from his throne. His golden eyes scanned the crowd before settling on Daniel. Silence fell. Then he spoke. You have surprised us, human. His deep voice carried across the arena. Strength is not always found in muscle, but in mind. You have shown both. Daniel met the Emperor's gaze, standing firm. I didn't fight to impress anyone. I fought because I made a promise. Alara is my bond. I stand with her. Gasps rippled through the nobles. Alara's heart pounded. The Emperor remained expressionless. Then, slowly, he descended the stone steps, stopping before them. He looked at Daniel, studying him, measuring him. Alara held her breath. Finally, the Emperor spoke. The Empire does not change easily, but today it has. A murmur spread through the crowd. Lord Varric's face twisted in anger, but he remained silent. The Emperor turned to Alara. You have chosen a difficult path, my daughter. A bond unlike any before it. Alara lifted her chin. Yes, and I do not regret it. The Emperor studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then your bond is recognized. Alara's breath caught. We did it. Daniel blinked. Wait, really? A rare smile touched the Emperor's lips. Yes, human. He turned to the nobles. The trial of strength has been passed. The bond stands. Let it be known across the Empire. Princess Alara and Daniel of Earth are bound. The arena erupted. Some nobles looked horrified. Others whispered in amazement. The common Zervani, the ones who had no power, looked at Daniel with something different in their eyes. Hope. Alara finally let herself move. She turned to Daniel and took his hands. We did it. He grinned. Told you I had a plan. She laughed, shaking her head. You are impossible. Daniel squeezed her hands gently. And yet, here we are. From the crowd, not everyone was pleased. Lord Varric's fists clenched, his eyes burned with fury. This wasn't over. Not yet. The celebration began at sunset. The grand hall of the palace was filled with light, music, and the hum of conversation. Nobles and warriors gathered, though not all were happy. Some whispered behind their hands, glancing at Daniel with doubt and disapproval. Others, especially the younger Zervani, watched him with curiosity. Alara stood beside him, her hand in his. She could still hardly believe it. The Emperor had accepted their bond. The law had been changed. Because of them. Daniel leaned in, whispering, "They're still staring." She smirked. They've never seen a human before, let alone one who won a fight against a Zervani warrior. Daniel chuckled. "Guess I'm making history." Before she could respond, the Emperor approached. The room fell silent. Alara straightened. "Father." The Emperor's golden eyes flickered between them. Then, to everyone's shock, he spoke not to Alara, but to Daniel. "You have done what no outsider has done before. You have earned your place among us." His voice was calm, but firm. "But know this, powerful enemies will rise against you. Not all will accept change so easily." Daniel nodded. "I figured as much." The Emperor studied him for a moment, then extended his hand. "Then stand strong. Protect what you have won." Daniel shook his hand without hesitation. "I will." Gasps filled the room. The human had just shaken the hand of the Emperor, a sign of equal respect. Alara felt a rush of pride. The Emperor turned to her. "You have always been strong, my daughter. I see that now." For the first time in her life, she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Pride. Then, just as quickly, he stepped away. The music resumed, the conversation restarted, but Alara knew this was only the beginning. Daniel sighed. "Well, that went better than expected." She smiled. "You are full of surprises." He smirked. "And you're stuck with me now." She squeezed his hand. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Across the room, Lord Varric watched them with cold fury. The Empire had changed today, but he would not let it stay that way. Not if he could stop it. As Alara and Daniel laughed together, unaware of the dangers still to come, one thing was clear. This was not just the end of their trial. It was the beginning of something much greater.